This is a KSPS Vote 2020 election special, a debate featuring candidates for the U.S. House of Representatives from Washington's 5th District.
Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Christy Goranson. KSPS is pleased to bring you this debate featuring the candidates running for Congress from Washington's 5th District. Let me introduce the candidates to you. Representative Cathy McMorris Rodgers was first elected to the House in 2004 and is seeking her 9th term in office. Dave Wilson is a business and real estate consultant and the former president of Interface College. This is his 3rd campaign for Congress. Welcome to you both. For this debate, the candidates will answer questions from 2 Spokane journalists. Kip Hill is a reporter for the Spokesman-Review, and Doug Nadvornick is program director and news director for Spokane Public Radio. Before we begin, I want to go over a few of the debate rules for our viewers. These rules were agreed to by the candidates. The panel can ask the same question to both of the candidates, or they can direct a question to just one. The panelist may request a follow-up to an answer. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer questions and 30 seconds for rebuttals. Candidates will have 1 minute for closing statements. So let's begin. A coin flip determined that Mrs. Rodgers, you will take the first question, and that will be coming from Doug. Let's get started.
Congresswoman, as we talk here, the chance that one more coronavirus relief bill appears to be on life support. So we're going to ask you, if you were to draw up a coronavirus relief proposal, what would be the essential elements and what would you leave out?
Thank you, everyone. And definitely an important question for people in Eastern Washington. I'm proud of the work that has been done to date. Very quickly, days after the national emergency was declared, Congress came together and passed the CARES Act. I do believe that we need an additional corona relief package. I was in D.C. the end of September, and a lot of negotiations underway. Kind of will pull the rabbit out of the hat to pull it together right now. As far as the priorities that I hear, I think at the top of the list is the liability protections that businesses and hospitals, schools need, because there's a growing number of lawsuits and people that are trying to take steps to be safe and secure. But also I think that there needs to be more flexibility within the Paycheck Protection Program. Nearly 10,000 businesses in Eastern Washington have already taken advantage of that. $1 billion has been huge in keeping people employed. And we need some flexibility to get more help out to keep people employed and our economy running.
All right, thank you. Mr. Wilson?
Well, I'd have to disagree. I don't think liability coverage is the most important issue. I think we need a pandemic relief bill, and I think it's really important we get it quickly because people are suffering, people are hurting. So to me, the priorities would be, first of all, getting increased unemployment benefits back to those people who are still unemployed through no fault of their own. And then secondly, more help for small business, whether it's through PPP or another new program. So to me, those would be the top 2 priorities. I don't think that the liability issue is as big a concern to the businesses as just getting their doors back open. To me, that's the higher priority, and that's why we need to get more funding for small businesses.
Right. Yes.
Well, I would just add that as I listen to businesses, but also schools, in order to get our schools open, I spent time in August talking to school superintendents and asking them what would it take to get our schools open safe and securely, and businesses too that need those guidelines. And an issue that has been raised time and time again is the liability protections, because the fear of a lawsuit, despite all of the effort that you might put into play or take, there's still thousands of lawsuits that have already been filed, and so I think it is critical.
All right, thank you.
Well, and I understand, I've heard you say that in other debates. However, one thing I would like to point out is that the Congresswoman did vote against the last package that was passed in the House. So if that was the concern, I'd have to ask, is liability coverage more important than helping people that are suffering? And also, you made a good point on the schools. They need help, but so does local governments, state governments. So that's another reason we need to pass another bill.
All right, we're going to move on to the next question. And Mr. Wilson, you will answer this one first from Kip.
Yeah. Let's stay on the topic of coronavirus response, because that's the big topic right now. I'd like you both to I mean, obviously this is going to require all of Congress sort of working together, but make the case for voters that your party, if voted in the White House or in Congress, is the one that should be leading that process to getting us out of the coronavirus pandemic.
Make the case for that?
Yeah.
Well, I think that the case is the Republican, well, I'm going to say the administration. I'm going to have to put the blame on the president. He's totally bungled the pandemic response. It goes back to, first of all, they shut down the Pandemic Prevention Office. Think about that. If that hadn't happened, where would we be? He decided not to tell the American people the truth. The truth, that's leadership 101. People can deal with the truth. They can't deal with it. They can't deal with the situation if they don't know what the truth is. So we lost the month of February and March due to his keeping it secret, and that got us behind the curve instead of ahead of the curve. We paid for that all the way along, and then to make matters worse, he didn't put together a coordinated national plan. He foisted that off on 50 governors, and that's no way to run a pandemic plan. It needs to be federal.
Thank you. Congresswoman?
The president took action very quickly. In January, actually, the president, as soon as it was discovered what the coronavirus and that it was coming from China and the Chinese New Year, he took action to shut down those flights from China. And he was criticized for that at that point. I think this administration has handled this crisis, which is really unprecedented, in an extraordinary way. And as I mentioned, when the president declared the national state of emergency, and the vice president was in Washington State. We had the very first case that first week of March. Vice president came out. He sat down with the governor, with the mayor of Seattle, with the delegation. The members of the House were there to make sure that we understood what the issues were, what the needs were, and that we went to work. And within days, we had a package passed on the president's desk. Congress, Republicans and Democrats came together. It was really extraordinary. And even now, Operation Warp Speed, which is an incredible collaboration between researchers and developers, is being brought forward by this administration, a vaccine.
But so it's not unprecedented. If you look back, the Ebola pandemic is what spawned the Pandemic Prevention Office. And it was up and running, and it was doing good work, and the Trump administration shut that office in 2018. You can go back 100 years to the Spanish flu. So pandemics are not unprecedented. Part of what we need to do, the federal government needs to do, is they need to anticipate existential threats or major threats and then make plans to deal with them when faced with them.
If I could?
Yes, go ahead, 30 seconds.
On Operation Warp Speed, it really is extraordinary. You think about the H1N1 or Ebola vaccines. They took years to develop. And this administration is doing both the research and the development at the same time, addressing those barriers. The manufacturing is being set up right now. So as soon as that vaccine, that safe vaccine is in place, they will be ready to go and help millions of people that need that vaccine. And I would say it's irresponsible to cast doubt on the safety of the vaccine at this point.
Do I get to rebut to that?
Yes.
Okay, so kudos to the warp speed thing, and I'm not questioning that. My concern is if they push this vaccine before it's ready, and that's what I believe the president's trying to do, is he's trying to push the vaccine before it's ready, that's going to erode trust in all vaccine programs. And this is going to cause problems that are going to last for generations if people do not trust this vaccine, or people are harmed, or people die from it. So we do need to push the vaccine, but not before it's safe. And sometimes it feels like the president is pushing it faster than that.
You can have another 30 seconds.
Well, I really think it's irresponsible to cast doubt on a vaccine that's going to save millions of lives. Safety is not being jeopardized. What is the focus is getting this development, a collaboration, extraordinary collaboration between researchers as well as the CDC, the NIH, to bring this forward, which is going to help millions of Americans.
All right, let's move on to the next question. And Congresswoman, you'll answer this one first. And it is coming from Doug. Yes.
Congresswoman, Mr. Wilson has questioned your independence from President Trump in different issues and views. So give me an example of a decision that you've disagreed with the president, either publicly or an opinion espoused by the president. And then, Mr. Wilson, give me an example where you agreed with a decision or an opinion espoused by the president. So we'll start with you, Congresswoman.
Well, you know, I get that question a lot these days. I would just point out that I am elected and I work for the voters of Eastern Washington. I'm proud and honored to be the representative of this 5th Congressional District, and the legislative branch is a co-equal branch of government. We are Article 1. And one example where I took a very strong position against the president was under the Article 1 provision, the power of the purse, when he was moving money within the administration, within the federal government, that I thought required, and I still believe today, it required congressional approval. We exercise the power of the purse. That's how we, on behalf of the people, make sure that the priorities of the people and through their elected representatives are reflected in their government. But I also am proud to have worked with this administration on policies to get our economy booming, bring down tax burden and the regulatory burden to give people jobs.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wilson.
So the question was, give me an example where you agreed with a decision made by or an opinion espoused by the president.
Wow. Well, that's a good question. I'm not a big fan of the president. I think you know that. I guess I would say that, and this goes back to one of the points the Congresswoman made, Congress did an excellent job getting the pandemic relief, the first big pandemic relief bill passed, and the president signed it. That was very important. It needed to be done. It was done in a quick and timely fashion, so kudos to them for that. Now we just need to do it again.
All right, thank you. Kip, you have the next question. Mr. Wilson, you'll take this one first.
Yes, we'll stay on the asking questions about the president. It's been reported that President Trump paid less in federal taxes than the lowest earners in this district in 2016 and 2017. That was the outcome of a New York Times investigation. Do you believe that's a problem? And if so, how would you propose changing the tax system to stop something like that from happening?
Well, I do think it's a problem, if nothing else, just from an optics standpoint. When the president is able to get by with paying that little taxes, it doesn't sit well with the average voter. The tax system is pretty dysfunctional, in my opinion. We need to get back to a more comprehensive tax bill, reform bill like the one that was passed in 1986. That's the model in my mind to go back to in tax reform. I think that the president compounds the problem when not only he pays little taxes, he boasts that that makes him look smart. I couldn't disagree more. I think it makes him look small. He should be an example of how the system should work for the benefit of all, not to the benefit of just a handful.
Thank you. Mrs. Rodgers?
Well, I know that New York Times article has been disputed as to the accuracy of it. I think what the president has said is that he has always paid the taxes that are due. I think I would highlight that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that we passed, that was signed into law by President Trump, that helped create a lot of jobs, closed loopholes. Perhaps the very loopholes that concerns people when individuals or corporations are not, or it's suggested that they're not paying income taxes. We passed that law. We closed loopholes. It brought down the average tax on a middle-class family by $2,000. It made it more competitive for our businesses that are located here in the United States of America. We brought down the corporate tax rate that had become the largest in the developed world and made sure that our businesses would be competitive. Before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we heard story after story of businesses that were moving their headquarters to other countries because it was not competitive. We need to make sure that we are competitive, and small businesses are the engine of our economy.
So my gripe with that tax bill was that they said that enough taxes would be generated to pay for itself, and that didn't happen. That has increased the national debt by just under another $2 trillion, and that's before COVID. You know, I drive a 12-year-old car, and I have no gripes driving that car. If I wanted to spend my grandkids' college money, I could get a brand new car. And in the past, what we've done as a country, when the economy is strong, we pay down our debt. We don't cut taxes. The economy was already strong. What we're doing is we're spending our grandchildren's money. That's the problem with a bill like that. It juiced the economy, no question. It works every time. But we didn't need it.
Mr. Wilson, you're out of
The economy
time.
is already strong.
Thank
And
you.
I'd like to,
30 seconds.
well, I might just mention our cars are even older, 18 and 14 years old, partly because of the mandates, government mandates that are driving up the cost of a new car, which also is another issue. But on the tax bill, on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, it helped create 7 million new jobs. Those are opportunities for people in America. It was the foundation of our booming economy, and it was long overdue, and I'm proud that we were able to get that passed and signed into law, and it's part of the foundation of a strong economy for our country.
All right. So this next question, KSPS partnered with the Spokane Valley Chamber of Commerce to collect some questions from local business community. And I'm going to ask this next question. This is from them. The infrastructure was a campaign promise of the president and one that has bipartisan support. It is also a way to put Americans back to work and reignite our economy. What would you do to support a future infrastructure package? And what projects in Eastern Washington State would you like to see come to fruition in such a package? And Mrs. Rodgers, you can go first.
Well, thank you. That's a really important question, and we need to address aging infrastructure in Eastern Washington and all over the country. I'm proud to have delivered results in bringing important funding for infrastructure in Eastern Washington, $170 million to help support our airports in Spokane and Pullman and Walla Walla, funding in the valley for bridging the valley and the overpasses, Sullivan Road and other projects there, transit projects in Eastern Washington. But we do need a federal infrastructure package, and President Trump is committed to working on that package. If there ever was a time, I think it's right now, as we think about how to respond to a pandemic, help grow our economy, create jobs, get people back to work. An infrastructure package would be a great way to do all of that, and as well as building the foundation for a strong economy.
Mr. Wilson.
So I couldn't agree more. We do need a strong infrastructure package. I would like to point out this was a campaign promise. You may recall in 2016, the Republicans had both the White House, the Senate, and the House. They could have passed the bill. They didn't pass it. So when elected, this will be a real priority for me because it does put people back to work, and it puts them back to work in good-paying jobs. And every study shows that for every dollar spent on infrastructure, there's a $5 to $7 return on payroll taxes. So, plus, not to mention the fact that we have some projects here in our district that need to be addressed, such as the North-South Freeway. If we could get some funding for that, that would be great. Highway 12 down in Walla Walla, I'll continue the 4-lane highway down there. We've got other projects like Highway 291 through off Francis Avenue down through 9 Mile and out towards Tum Tum. So those are some examples, but this is a good idea.
Thank you. Ms. Rodgers?
Yes, those are all important infrastructure package, absolutely getting more funding for the North-South corridor, which I have long supported and helped deliver, Highway 12. You know, one of the successes of the Trump administration has actually been reducing the time frame for federal permitting around major projects. Elaine Chao, who's the Secretary of Transportation, has made it her priority to reduce what was 7 years on average for a federal project to get permitted, to get that down to 1 year so that we can actually get more money to actually the building of roads and addressing our infrastructure. And those are the kind of solutions that we need to continue to promote.
So I guess we're largely in agreement on this one. I would also say there are several bridges in our district that are in question as far as their integrity, their safety. And then the other one I forgot to mention earlier was broadband. I'd like to see broadband become an infrastructure issue and have that be readily available, especially to rural parts of the district that have subpar coverage. I think that's a really important issue, bringing them into the 21st century.
All right. Mr. Wilson, you'll take this next question from Doug.
All right, so I have slightly different questions for the two of them. The Affordable Care Act is on the Supreme Court's agenda in November, and there's a chance it could be judged unconstitutional. So if there was a replacement to the Affordable Care Act, what would you insist on in a new health care bill?
Well, I'd probably like to see universal health care, health insurance. I think that the way I look at it is health care should be a right, not a privilege, and we should have every person in this country covered. We don't. I think the ACA was a step in the right direction, and I think if it's not overturned, I think we need to continue to build on it. I would like to point out that my opponent has voted voted to repeal the ACA over 60 times. And again, in 2016, actually 2017, when they took office, they had the House, they had the Senate, they had the White House. There was their chance to pass their bill. Instead, they spent all their energy trying to kill the ACA, and thankfully, John McCain cast the deciding vote to prevent that from happening. So that's what I would like to see, is universal health insurance. I don't think the Republicans have a plan. They haven't been able to put one forward for the last 10 or 12 years.
Well, we'll ask the Congresswoman about that. So how would a Republican version of a replacement for the ACA be different than what the ACA is now, and what would you retain that's part of the ACA?
You know, despite the promises of the ACA, it hasn't fulfilled what it was promised. There's still 20 million Americans that do not have health insurance. The promise was premiums would come down on average by $2,000, and it hasn't happened. And I think we need to continue to focus on how do we ensure that people have access to quality and affordable health care. Absolutely, we must protect those with pre-existing conditions. That should not be in question at all, and Republicans and Democrats agree on this. President Trump has passed an executive order to make it clear that those with pre-existing conditions would be protected. In the House, we would like to pass that bill, but the Democrats seem to want to have a talking point more than actually getting that done. I also believe that we need price transparency, that we need to know what is the actual price for whatever's happening, and that will help restore decision-making between a doctor and a patient. And it would also address, like right now we have surprise billing, and that should not ever happen when someone goes and gets a surprise bill.
Oh, okay.
I would say the fact that we have 20 million people unemployed, that's not because of the Democrats. I think the Democrats have been the party that have tried to get health care put into place and make sure everyone is covered. I think that's a result of Republicans and the administration dragging their feet. And by the way, the executive order that he signed regarding pre-existing conditions, my understanding is that's largely symbolic, that it really has no teeth or no enforcement.
I would just highlight, though, it is President Trump making it clear that whatever happens, those with pre-existing conditions are going to be protected. It's interesting, you know, you look at Medicaid right now in Washington State, and the Medicaid expansion that has largely gone to able-bodied adults. There's 15,000 individuals with disabilities on a waiting list for Medicaid. So it highlights that the priorities are not right. Medicaid is a very important safety net. And so it's not just talking about it, it's actually, okay, what are the policies that are going to help make sure that the needs are met of every person, their health care needs are met?
All right, Kip, you have the next question, and Mrs. Rodgers, you'll answer this one first.
We've already broached the subject of pre-existing conditions, which has been, I think, a large sort of concern from a lot of people, and you mentioned it, Congresswoman, as being a potential talking point. How would your proposal, how does that work? How can you explain it to people that it's going to make sure that it covers those with pre-existing conditions?
Well, the way that you protect it is to put it into law, that no one can be denied a health insurance plan because of a pre-existing condition. And there's legislation, I've co-sponsored legislation that I would like to see pass so that this issue is taken off the table, and that the fear-mongering around it and the concerns that it raises in people's minds as to whether or not they or their children are going to have that coverage can be cleared. I have a son with disabilities. He's always going to have a pre-existing condition. And it is personal, and it is a priority for me and my family as it is for anyone who has that pre-existing condition. And I'm just dismayed that we cannot get this actually passed right now. It seems like scoring political points is more important. But I have consistently supported policies that are going to improve healthcare. Telehealth, the Teaching Health Center, more residencies in Eastern Washington, expanded health savings accounts. These are all solutions that are going to help people make sure that they get the health care they need.
I think it's a question for Mr. Wilson, if you want to respond to that, but also what plan what do you propose to make sure that the people who have pre-existing conditions are covered?
I think we already have a plan in place that covers pre-existing conditions. She talks about this legislation like it's some miracle. We have this in place now with the ACA. Can't we build on the ACA? No. She has voted against it 60 times. Now, she just gave a list of things that she's done. Great, kudos to you. But when you vote against the big bill, the overarching bill 60 times, that's a much bigger statement. So I'm sorry, I can't see your point, because pre-existing conditions are already covered, and the things that you mentioned pale in comparison to keeping the ACA in place. And I'm sorry, what was the other part of your question?
What would you do? And it sounds like you would build upon the Affordable Care Act.
I'd build upon it,
Okay.
yes. And again, people can keep their private insurance. I think we've learned that as this has evolved, people like their private insurance. Let them keep it. If we want a longer-term solution to fix the whole system, let's take 10 years and do it in an incremental fashion where people can plan and plan accordingly.
Well, despite the good intentions, despite the promises of the Affordable Care Act, it has not fulfilled the promises. It has not. Even if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you like your health insurance plan, you can keep your health insurance plan. That didn't happen. Thousands of people in Eastern Washington, individuals, small business owners, have lost their doctor of choice, their health insurance plan of choice. And today in America, 20 million Americans still do not have health insurance. So it has not delivered on the promises. We need real results.
Okay, but I couldn't disagree more. The reason we haven't fulfilled the promise is they've been fighting us every step of the way for 10 years. This has gone on for 10 years. 60 votes against the Affordable Care Act. The people who are not insured are not people who can help themselves. It's people that can't help themselves. Those people are hurting. And where do they go to get their care? They go to hospital emergency rooms. Who pays for that? All of us.
Great, thank you. Let's see, Mr. Wilson, you'll take this next question first from Doug.
So we've broached the topic of the deficit. We learned last week that the annual federal deficit topped $3 trillion due in part to federal spending on pandemic-related relief measures. But at what point does the country go back to starting to think about fiscal discipline again and worrying about the deficit?
So when I ran for Congress in 2016, the national debt was one of my key priorities. We need to deal with this issue. And so the only exception is when you're in a crisis. And this is why, when I mentioned earlier, we should be paying down the debt, not cutting taxes so that to juice the economy. When times are good, you pay down the debt. When times are bad and you need an emergency, that's when you spend money. We're in an emergency. We're not through it. We're still in the middle innings of this COVID emergency. So When the house is on fire, you don't worry about the water bill. You put out the fire. So until we're through this crisis and it's in our rearview mirror, we have to get relief to people. We can't worry about the bill. We got to help people. We got to make sure people are not suffering. They're not evicted from their homes. We got a lot of work to do. But as soon as we get past that, you bet we need to focus on getting the deficit under control and then address the national debt.
I believe that we need a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. We need something. We need to make sure that Congress is spending within its means. Every family has to balance its budget. The states have to balance their budgets. This is an emergency, and we've had to spend more money than ever. But I appreciate you asking the question, because this is a very important issue as you think about the debt that we've taken on and the impact that that's going to have on our children, on our grandchildren, that also are going to have to pay for a military and pay for Social Security and health care. And if they're making larger and larger interest payments, they won't be able to do that. I have led on both fiscal reforms and economic reforms. One of the best things you need to do both. You need to have a growing economy so more people are working and paying taxes, right? And that's why the economic formula of lifting the tax burden, lifting the regulatory burden, yes to American energy and better trade deals was part of a solution.
Okay, so I've heard this now for 10, 12 years from the Congresswoman, balanced budget amendment. I haven't seen it proposed, or there's been absolutely no action on it. So here's the other thing. If she really believes that, then why did you vote for the tax cut? Because you knew it was going to increase the deficit. Now again, every time they pass a tax cut, we're going to grow the economy so fast, it'll pay for itself. That's never happened. So look, it's not about taxes. It's not about a balanced budget amendment. It's about fiscal management and making sure that you put together a comprehensive plan that pays for itself and balances economic growth needs against it.
It's absolutely about lowering the tax burden, getting our economy growing. We had people at the beginning of the year, people coming off the sidelines. We had more job openings than people on unemployment. That means more people are going to be paying taxes. That's a positive. It also is about a balanced budget amendment, and I have co-sponsored it. I voted for it in the House. It's every Democrat in the House and the Senate that opposes a balanced budget amendment. And I've also worked on the reforms to the agencies and to the programs, the USA Act, the Unauthorized Spending Accountability Act, to go after the zombie programs and spending within the federal government.
Okay, thank you. Kip, you have this next question. Mrs. Rodgers, you will answer this one.
Let's continue on the theme of the deficit, because there were some suggestions there that later we're going to have to make difficult decisions. I think a lot of people are concerned looking at that deficit and looking at the social programs that are very important to them, Social Security, Medicare, all that kind of stuff. What assurance can you give voters that once we emerge from this, hopefully, we're all knocking on wood, that those programs are going to remain intact when we get there?
Well, we need to be taking, it's a great question, because we need to be taking steps right now to provide security within Social Security and within Medicare for our seniors. There should not be these threats that those who have worked their entire lives, paid into Social Security, are perhaps not going to get what they are depending upon getting. So the sooner that we take action, but it's going to have to be bipartisan. It is too easy for one party to villainize the other. So this is going to take real leadership, where Republicans and Democrats say, we're going to commit to this. We're going to commit to making sure that Medicare is there. Right now, the average couple pays in $100,000 into Medicare and is pulling out $250,000. You can tell that that's not going to be, you're not going to be able to sustain that. So we need to be taking action now and providing that confidence to our seniors and to others that are going to be dependent upon those programs moving forward.
Well, there's no easy answer here, and it is going to take a bipartisan solution. We're working ourselves into a pickle. There's just no other way to put it. And these chickens will come home to roost if we don't get a handle on the national debt and the annual deficits. So there's lots of different ways that you can approach modifying Social Security, Medicare. But here's the thing. We can't do that overnight. We have to do it over the long term. people need to be able to plan and they need to be able to count on things. So we can't do, in my way of thinking, you can't change anything to people who are over the age of 50. They're too close to retirement age, and they wouldn't be able to make adjustments in their planning, their financial planning, to take into account different structures with Medicare and Medicaid, or excuse me, Medicare and Social Security. So again, a comprehensive plan is going to be needed. It's going to need to be bipartisan. We're going to have to pick our poison which way to replenish those trust funds.
Yes, I think it's very important that seniors know that there is a commitment by Republicans and Democrats to making sure that these programs are secure and that Social Security and Medicare are going to be there. To put it in, this is kind of interesting. If the interest rates go up 1%, we'll be spending more money on debt service in the United States of America than our national defense, on our military. This is a very real issue, and that's why solutions like addressing unauthorized spending that I'm leading on in Congress to sunset programs that continue to be on autopilot are proposals that I think make a real difference.
And that's why I said this can't affect people over 50 because they're too close to those ages. Again, I don't have a specific answer for how to restructure these programs. I'm just saying that at some point they're probably going to have to be restructured, but not to people who are already on the programs or close to retirement age. So I didn't mean to imply otherwise.
All right, I have a question. This is another question from the Chamber of Commerce. And Mr. Wilson, you'll answer this question first. So just before the pandemic, a major concern of the business community was a shortage of skilled workers. Once we get past the pandemic, what would you propose to address this shortage so that businesses in the Spokane region can continue to grow and create more jobs?
Well, the answer in my mind is easy, and it's just education. And so if you want to have a thriving economy, it starts with an educated workforce. And so we need to make sure that post-secondary education, whether it's college, vocational training, or apprenticeships, whatever it might be, is readily available and affordable. And the cost of higher education has become too high, and it keeps a lot of people from pursuing those dreams. So if we invest in education, the economic development will follow. It's the best way to ensure that we have a ready workforce. It's the best way to ensure that businesses will either stay in the area or even move to the area if they know that we have a well-educated workforce. So the federal government isn't the main driver in that area, but we could also help the states by providing additional funds, and I think we should.
Yes, I'm proud to have supported the workforce training and opportunity program that we got passed that is especially focused on community colleges and providing more opportunities there. The Trump administration has led on expanding apprenticeship programs. One of the best programs that I visited locally that I think was a program by the Associated General Contractors working with women helping women, women that are fleeing from domestic violence and are being introduced to the trades, being introduced to electrician and plumbing and drywall, and being given an opportunity for skills and an opportunity for a better life. Those are the kind of creative solutions that we need to continue to promote so that everyone, no matter where they come from, they have that opportunity for a better life. And it starts with an education. I was the first in my family to graduate from college. My parents dreamed for me to do that, so I'd have an opportunity for a better life. And we need to make sure that our kids are graduating and they have that opportunity for further education and skills so that they can get a good paying job.
All right, let's move on to the next question. Let's see, Congressman, you'll answer this one first from Doug.
All right, so let's switch to wildfires. Some politicians, such as the president, are blaming western wildfires, especially those in California, on bad forest management. But much of what burned in Washington was not timber this year, it was rangeland. How do you address that at a time when the climate is warming and becoming drier?
Mm-hmm. Well, I do believe that the climate is changing, but I also believe that we need better forest management. When you look at decades and decades of kind of a stepping back, we have not been taking the action to be good stewards and to make sure that these forests are green and healthy. It is outrageous, the condition of our forest. Tens of millions of acres of National Forest Service lands and trees that are diseased, bug infested. And that's where we need better forest management because it becomes kindling and larger catastrophic fires. So I have supported legislation. We fixed faro borrowing, so we no longer are borrowing from management accounts. But I've also led on the ground with the A to Z project on the Colville National Forest that is a national model that the Lands Council, the Nature Conservancy, industry all laud because of the results that it's getting on better forest management.
So I would like to point out that the fires in the forest, most of them are federal lands, and she represents the federal government. So the president likes to blame this on the states, but there are more national forests than there are state forests. And when it comes to climate change, to me, that is the underlying issue, and that is the overriding issue. And we're not going to get back to any kind of normalcy when we have an administration and a Congress, including the Congresswoman, who really doesn't believe in climate change. Now, she's just said, I believe the climate is changing, but she doesn't believe in the theory of climate change. And I think the evidence is in. The scientists are all in agreement. This is an issue, but nothing happens. No national plan. We were withdrawn from the Paris Climate Agreement. This administration and the Congresswoman and her fellow lawmakers, they deny that this is an issue, and it's the underlying issue. It's the root problem of these fires.
If you actually go visit the forest, I think any one of us would be outraged. It's heartbreaking to see millions of acres of trees that are bug infested, that are dying. They are dying. It's mismanagement. And on climate change, I am proud that America is leading on reducing carbon emissions. We've reduced carbon emissions over the last 10 years more than any other country in the world without the Paris Accords. It's the European Union countries that aren't meeting their mandates that were put in place by the Paris Accords. Not one. In fact, only 5 have met 50%. It's not getting results.
Well, so the Forest Service used to spend a fraction of its budget on firefighting. It spent more of its budget on fire prevention. That's no longer the case. Now they spend over 60% of their budget, and it continues to grow on firefighting. The administration controls the Forest Department. If you don't like the state of the forest, you have the ability to change it now. It doesn't take another act of Congress. Just fund. Well, I guess might need more funding, but the bottom line is the president controls that department. If he wants to do something, he could.
This president has. We passed legislation to fix fire borrowing, the very issue that you're pointing to, where we were borrowing money, the funds for managing the forest, to fight fires. And it was this administration working with Congress, Republicans and Democrats, came together and finally got that done. And we also passed legislation to start taking some steps to promote like A to Z projects that are a collaborative approach to the issues on the ground that are going to ensure that we are doing action that's going to benefit all of the stakeholders on the forest.
Okay, so if you've done all these things, if the U.S. Forest Service, if they have all this ability, why aren't they doing it? You're complaining about the job they're doing, but it's controlled by your administration. Why doesn't the president get to the bottom of it? Why doesn't he do something more to address the issues that you've raised?
Do I get to respond?
Yeah, why don't we go one more round? 30
Okay.
seconds, 30 seconds.
Well, I would just submit that we have taken action. I guess I'm a bit frustrated by those who are so quick to point to climate change and put their head in the ground as far as the actual work on the ground, the tough work of bringing a collaborative together the stakeholders to ensure that the trees are healthy and taking care of wildlife and trails. We are leading the country. The Colville National Forest, the A to Z project, is a national model. The chief came out and visited and said, this is what we need to be doing all over the country. We're leading the way.
Okay, so if you're frustrated, then why are you complaining about the state of the forest? You went on and on about you would be heartbroken when you go into the forest, you'd be shocked to see the condition of the forest, but you're frustrated when I call into question why doesn't the president order the Forest Service to do something about it? And talk about sticking your head in the sand, come on. Climate change is the underlying issue. Which party, which administration, which congressperson is sticking their head in the sand over climate change?
All right, let's move on to the next question. Mr. Wilson, you'll take this one from Kip.
Yeah, I'd like to shift gears a little bit here. We talked quite a bit about wildfires. I want to talk about a topic that's come up here over the last couple of days, and that's sort of social media's control or potential government control of what social media can and can't sort of distribute. The Congresswoman has said that she has some concerns with how Twitter has handled the distribution of political stories here during this campaign, and in the past has expressed concern about how it treats conservative viewpoints. My question is, do you believe that government should have more control in regulating what is distributed on these accounts and why on these social media platforms?
Well, this is an area of concern. I think that it's led to a lot of problems in our society with fragmentation and with, the shared experience has been, I think, affected. I think that something needs to be done. I'm not quite sure what. I think we need to respect First Amendment free speech law. This is going to take definitely a bipartisan effort, and it's going to take a lot of discussion and a lot of wisdom, because there's a fine line to be walked between freedom of speech and trying to control or have better controls over misinformation and disinformation. I think something needs to be done, but I don't think that we've started on it, and I think it's probably a good idea to start on it right after the election.
Well, there were liability protections that were put in place for these large platforms, for Twitter, for Facebook, and they have abused. They've crossed a line, in my opinion, because and we need to review whether those liability protections still stand, because when you have Twitter that is shutting down conservatives, or whether it's Dennis Prager, or whether it is the New York Post, that is the fourth largest newspaper in America, an article some research that they had done on Hunter Biden and his activities with Ukraine, and it's blackballed by Twitter. I think that is going too far. This is not free speech, and they are not allowing for the free speech. And at the same time, they're allowing falsehoods to stand. The World Health Organization continues to have a tweet standing that the coronavirus cannot be transmitted from person to person. And Twitter hasn't done anything there, or activities by China and Russia. So yes, I have been pretty clear in saying that we need to review Section 230.
Well, I think that this isn't a conservative issue, it's a truth issue. And so I don't think that those sites took down tweets or posts because they were conservative. They took them down because they were anti-fact or they were anti-truth. Look, the president has probably benefited from social media and Twitter more than any human in the world. So I find it ironic that all of a sudden this is an issue that only conservative posts and tweets are being blocked, because I think it's more to do with truth and misstatements of facts.
Well, free speech, whether or not you agree with it or not, should be what is allowed. And I would submit that the Democrats passed a bill this year that would allow the Attorney General to decide what is truth or not in campaign advertising, which I think I don't think any Democrat wants the Attorney General Bill Barr to decide what is truth, as I didn't want Eric Holder deciding what was truth. So I think we need to err on the side of free speech and more speech and allowing for that to be applied across the board for all.
So I did make the point that First Amendment's important. I didn't say that it's not important. And you're right, we don't want Bill Barr making those decisions. I can attest for all Democrats across the country on that. Look, First Amendment, as I said earlier, this is a balancing act. And it's an issue. It needs to be addressed. I don't have an answer, but I know in my bones that something's wrong with social media, the effect it's having on our society. I'm all for free speech. I'm just saying a process needs to be started. It needs to be looked at because of the problems it's causing with our society. That's all I'm saying.
All right, let's move on to the next question. And Mrs. Rodgers, you'll take this one from Doug.
All right, another regulation question. So the president, as you've noted, has been very aggressive in reducing federal regulations wherever he thinks they're not appropriate. Sometimes, though, that runs afoul of state regulations where they kind of conflict and there's inconsistency. In what areas should federal regulations override state regulations and vice versa? Are there some areas that are common there?
Oh my. Well, those are, I think those have to be decided really on a state by, or a case by case basis. I serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee. It was established at the very beginning of this country, along with Ways and Means, because of the Commerce Clause. And the Commerce Clause regulates activity between the states. And so I guess I would say that those are the very decisions that come before the Energy and Commerce Committee. And it, you know, at times, you know, we have a federal Clean Water Act, we have a federal Clean Air Act, a federal Endangered Species Act, a federal Environmental Protection Act that previous Congresses have put into place, and we have to adhere to them. I think when the states go above, you know, we have a situation right now with California and what they're doing with car emissions. And we were talking about how old our cars are. California has put a standard above and really is dictating to the rest of the country what the standard may or may not be for the rest of the country. And I think that's when it gets difficult, but I think you have to adhere to that. There has to be some opportunity, or I think where the federal government needs to come in and limit a patchwork of laws.
So we hear a lot of talk about regulations, usually from the president. Look, the business that I ran was a heavily regulated business, and it needed to be. And what I found was this: I didn't like all regulations, but they were necessary because people take advantage of rules when they're not strict enough or when they're not strong enough. So to me, it's not a question of, is regulation bad? There's a sweet spot. Over-regulation is not good. Under-regulation is not good. No regulation is terrible. So there is a sweet spot, and there's a process that can be followed. In Washington State, we had good processes in my business, which was vocational training, where we sat down with regulators and we talked about, okay, is this a good regulation? Is this a bad regulation? We reviewed them every couple of years, and that kept us in that sweet spot. So that's the process that can be modeled, can be a model and can be used elsewhere.
I think there's a role, but we have become so regulated, and there's conflicting regulations between the state and the federal government. I think one of the best things that the Trump administration has done, this formula of lifting the tax burden, reducing the regulatory burden, providing clarity, the saying yes to American energy and better trade deals, resulted in a booming economy, allowing somebody to take their idea for a new product and a new service and actually do something with it, rather than the government coming along and saying, oh no, you can't do that. It's that freedom and opportunity that has defined America and has resulted in us leading the world.
So I think that's overstated and overblown. It's an easy fallback for the business community to say, oh, we're overregulated. We need to cut regulations. What about the banks? There's a good example. 2008, was anybody cheering on the banks? No, we were ready to nationalize the banks. I wasn't, but it was serious because they did not have enough regulation. So we passed Dodd-Frank. Not perfect regulation, because no regulation is perfect. But what did the banking industry do over the next 10 years? Piece by piece, dismantle the regulations so they can go back to having, free and fair competition, or whatever you want to call it. But who ends up paying for it? The people.
All right, we are out of time. It's time for closing statements. I know that went fast, didn't it? So that will be the last question, and it is time now for closing statements. And Mrs. Rodgers, you go first. You have 1 minute.
Okay, well, just want to say thank you to everyone who made this debate possible. This is the most important election of our lifetime, and I urge everyone to make their voices heard and to vote. My vision is one of hope at a time when there is adversity that we've had. This isn't our first crisis, and it won't be our last crisis, but America's story, America's strength has always been one that has rested upon us rising to the occasion and overcoming our challenges. My vision is one of hope and that results in freedom and opportunity for every person, no matter where they come from, no matter the circumstances of their birth. My vision is one of a brighter and better future for my children and our children and grandchildren in Eastern Washington, so that they can live the Eastern Washington dream. You know, I started out this year saying that the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And I think it's more important now. And so I urge people to join me in inventing the future and imagining a brighter future. I ask for your support, and may God bless you and bless the United States of America.
So thanks to KSPS for putting on this debate. While I disagree with Representative McMorris Rodgers on many issues, she is my political opponent. She is not my enemy. However, this election is about political courage and leadership, and McMorris Rodgers has demonstrated little of either. The president, in my view, is a danger to our democracy, and he is enabled by GOP lawmakers who refuse to stand up to him or speak up to him, and this includes McMorris Rodgers. She has consistently acted in the interest of her party and district, over district and country. I am calling on all Democrats, independents, and concerned Republicans to support our campaign. Together, we can come together as a nation and help this nation heal. I will be a regional advocate and will work with local leaders and organizations to ensure we get the support we need during this current crisis. I'm a common sense, grow the pie, no drama Democrat. My interest is in representing the people of the district. I care about you and your family's future. I'm Dave Wilson, and I humbly ask for your vote in this election. Thank you.
Well, that will have to do it for this debate. Thank you to you both. Thanks to our candidates as well as our journalists, Doug Nadvornick and Kip Hill. And if you are not registered to vote, it's not too late. You have until October 26th to register online or by mail. And you can even register to vote in person until 8 p.m. on Election Day. For all of us at KSPS, thank you for watching.